All right, it's 10:15. Let's get started. Good morning. My name is Tim Arnold. I'm here to talk about being a DIY digital audiophile. Something I enjoy quite a bit. I feel very strongly about. I believe that you can DIY your way to what would otherwise be very expensive audio systems, and I enjoy it. I have my email information up here. Please grab it. I'm more than willing and very happy to communicate with anybody on this stuff. As I said, I enjoy it quite a bit. We're just going to talk about some brief background. The conversation begins with it's 2023, and we're actually having the conversation about vinyl versus CD versus digital. Believe it or not. Good morning. Are you coming in? I'll wait a second. Oh, you're okay. So this is an actual conversation we're having in 2023. Is vinyl better than CDs? Is better than digital? Background to that, I want to mention that this is a topic of great debate. The group of us that are sitting in here could probably spend the next 2 hours or longer debating where the best sound is. This is very much personal, and it's very much about how we individually connect with our music collections. I'm a vinyl collector, I will tell you. I'm also very into digital music, and I find advantages to both. The idea of our conversation today is how we can get back to our digital music collections and wade in through the sea of CDs and digital music files that we may have floating around, and organize it in a way that's convenient and sounds good after the fact. Just a quick background and talking about vinyl. As we all know, vinyl has great sound. That's what people like about it. Arguably, I'm going to use that word probably a few times here today because it is an argument. Does vinyl sound better? Some people say it does. Some people say it doesn't. It does, if anything, flavors the sound of what you're listening to in such a way that's pleasing to a lot of us, myself included. It is, again, an arguably pure analog reproduction of music. We can get into a conversation about the origins of vinyl, but that's not what this talk is about. But you can say that vinyl is authentic, it's tangible, it's collectible. Some folks see it as an investment, but again, this is something that it is that we'd like to get back to in terms of our digital music. If you're not aware of this, vinyl sold close to 50 million records last year in the United States. It is the 16th consecutive year that vinyl album sales grew in the United States, and in 2022 it was the first year since 1987 where more records were sold than CDs. That announcement came out about a week ago, and I'm pretty amazed by that. And it's growing; it continues to grow. If you get into doing some research on the record industry, you will find out that there is a 6 months to a year backlog on producing records at this point, and sometimes longer. If you're a small band starting out and you wanted to produce an album, you'd be waiting a while to get that full album pressed onto record. It's an amazing thing that's happening because there just isn't record producing plants and the labor, I mean the infrastructure available anymore because it was all dismantled at the end of the 80s. CDs, however, are still pretty great. They've been around since 1982. It is arguably, again, perfect recreation. It is digital sound. They can be had for very cheap. We can go to our library, take out a stack of CDs and bring them home and check them out. You can find them in used record stores for $5, sometimes as low as $1. CDs are cheap, and they're still pretty great. Digital music, why have we moved to digital music? And I would argue that this is we're sort of the death of how we listen to music began 20 years ago with the introduction of MP3 players and portable digital media. People stopped listening to music as a large sort of package, buying an album, listening to an entire album. Some things changed. But what's great about digital music is the convenience, a quick choice of putting together a playlist. In some instances, digital music is lossy. You would say, if you're an audiophile, I refuse to listen to MP3s. I refuse to listen to other formats of digital music because the sound just isn't good enough. Has anyone in here done a side-by-side comparison of MP3s and CDs? What's your opinion? You agree as well? Yeah, it's awful. Do you have an opinion on lossless audios? I'm going to talk about it for a second.
I have an opinion where it comes to what are you listening to it on. It doesn't matter. File is high resolution, and you're saying you are practice at speed.
I agree. Unfortunately, the years of iPods and MP3 players and digital music as it started out have trained a lot of people's ears to not hear the quality in their systems. Yep. I agree. There are some creative solutions to that. There are quite a few digital audio converters that you can get to plug into your phone, which solves some of that. It's questionable. I agree. And again, so we all are familiar with MP3 players. Just to quick mention, May 10th of last year, the last iPods were discontinued, if you're aware of that. So that's the entire life of the iPod from October of 2001 till May of 2022. We're done with iPods. Apple has moved completely over to their iPhones, no longer dealing with those things. But digital audio players can be good. That's a topic for another talk. But digital audio players, if they're hacked the right way, or if their current generation of digital audio players that are out now in 2023, and again, I'm not going to talk too much about that today, but the current generation of digital audio players that are existing, they got some good ones out there. If you're willing to spend the money, there's some really nice ones. So what's digital music missing? I hear all the time with records that there's a warmth and realism and a sound quality. If you're familiar with the argument that Neil Young and some other artists presented starting about 10 years ago, I highly recommend you Google this. Neil Young was a serious proponent of FLAC audio and lossless audio, and very much against digital audio. He's amongst the artists that refuse to allow their music to be put up on to Spotify and other digital providers simply for the lack of sound quality. But I would argue the records specifically provide an immediate connection to music. It's an authentic experience. You're holding it, you're touching it, you're opening you're opening your jacket, you're looking at it. It's a connection through the authenticity of stuff, as I like to call it. And I think that's a great experience that folks have. How can we get back to that? How can we reconnect with our forgotten music? I believe that path, and this is nothing new. This stuff has been around for 20 years. People don't know about it. They're not familiar with it. It's sort of, as it's been pushed by Apple Music with Apple Lossless Audio and a couple other providers providing lossless audio, people are starting to learn about the equipment, are starting to get better at it in terms of their musical listening choices. But it's something that's not a whole lot known, and I think people can reconnect with their music through lossless audio because the sound is comparable. And if you're using the right equipment, if you have the right digital audio converter, the right setup, you can get back to perfect sounding music. If you get into audiophiles with $100,000 audio systems, they're using amazing digital audio servers that are pumping out beautiful sounding music. I'm sure as a music producer, you're familiar with this.
I actually think a lot of this is
okay. Are you involved in using WAV files? I heard somebody mention WAV files. Mm-hmm.
Interesting to me simply to try to gather all the different files I have, see how well we can. That's really, as you said, we can sit for 2.5 hours.
Oh, it's
what's better, but I think there's a lot of constructive scarcity with this whole vinyl thing now. It's a lot of marketing. So yes, when CDs first came out, they were pretty crappy because they just took stuff and they shoved it through a crappy digital converter and made it a CD. Now bands are saying, "Oh, I've got to have vinyl," and they're taking digital recordings and they're putting them on vinyl. So, like, where does that madness stop?
And look, that conversation about vinyl is a whole nother talk. But what they're doing, it depends on how it's produced and who you're getting, where it's coming from. If you're paying attention to what Blue Note Records is doing, for example, with
care about the part of the person who cares about, oh, I'm going to listen to this band because they recorded the album in analog tape. And that tape was mastered to tape. And that tape was played into a lathe, make the vinyl, and it's all homegrown analog, and you care about it. That's great. That's your prerogative. I don't care about it. I care about the music and whether the music has gone through any degradation process. So if it's recorded in Pro Tools or whatever volume, if it's recorded well and mic placement is well done, musicians are good, they've got great products, and they put it out on CD and it's mastered well, it wasn't over compressed, talk about the loud swords and all that kind of stuff. If it was well done and it's on CD or if it's streaming, I don't care. But I'm not everybody. A lot of people are so hyped up on all of these sections.
I think what's happening, and this is a bigger social science conversation about authenticity. And as my wife and I complained that the hipster generation. So I'm sorry, but you're the young guy in the room, so I'm going to point at you. Sorry. Sort of the hipster generation, and I think the growth of vinyl is what's pushing. Is one of the things this particular generation is in searching for something that's not digital. They're searching for things that they can grab onto and hold, and there's a direct connection to it. And I think that's where vinyl is coming in. But as well, a point to the loss of the experience of sitting down and listening to music, and I think that's the other side to that. Why vinyls is good. You're forced to sit down, listen to a side, as opposed to picking tracks. And I think that experience is something that personally myself, I collect vinyl. I'm a vinyl collector, but I'm also a digital music collector. But I like putting a record on and the visceral quality of sitting and listening and having to not move for 18 and a half minutes, I think is part of that connection. The other side to that, and we're going to get to this, is the information piece. And I think that's something that's been missing for a long time. Certainly iTunes and Spotify have integrated information into their browsers as well. But let me move through this because I'm going to get to that, and I think this is a great conversation. Just very, very quickly, I like and personally use, and there are some audiophile arguments to this. I like the FLAC codec, free lossless audio codec. It was written roughly around 2001. I made an argument in 2001. I had an enormous CD collection. I'm not going to go away from CDs into digital music until I can be promised that I'm going to get the full audio experience out of the digital file. And that's FLAC came out, and that was my trigger to start ripping all my music to FLAC. It's relatively small. It can be easily streamed across a local network, and easily streamed if you got a good connection to the wide network as well. You can get some good streaming from FLAC. You can convert a huge CD collection and put it onto a single hard drive. A 3 terabyte hard drive can be had for about $60. I'm going to be looking for some today. Can hold 5,000 to 10,000 CDs, and back it up, and you're all set. You're all ready to go. As well, how do we listen? Talking about digital audio players. This is a picture. There's quite a few of these, and I mentioned the new generation sort of MP3 players. This is the current build of the Sony Walkman, Sony's sort of high-res digital audio player. These go for around $300. You can get digital audio players as expensive as $2,000 and $3,000 that are, I've not heard one of them that expensive, but I'm sure they sound like a $2,000 digital audio player sounds. But beyond that, how do we listen in our home? How do we connect with our media in home? And there are some great, most of these are Linux based as well as available on Windows, but there are some nice open source clients, or I'm sorry, open source servers that are available. And I'm just going to go through some of them here. Sort of the grandfather of digital audio servers is Logitech Media Server, and it exists as the back end for a lot of open source media servers that are out. You can find Logitech Media Servers APIs in the back of a lot of stuff. And it's still great. Logitech is not making the things that Logitech Media Server feeds anymore. They let it around 2006, I'm going to say, be open sourced. So it's now a fairly heavily developed open source application. Logitech Media Server, the most recent version was out about a month ago, and they're constantly updating it, and it's constantly growing and changing, and it's still pretty rock solid. I have some very serious audiophile friends that disagree with me on this. They like the Roon server a little bit more. They feel that there's some better audio qualities off of Roon. I don't get that or see that. My other issue with Roon is you're paying a subscription fee for it. I think it's a great application, but you're paying a subscription fee to listen to your music on your hard drive. And they're connecting you with their information services. And I kind of have some issues with that. But don't get me wrong, and don't let me disparage Roon, because it's great. I'm just not paying $10 a month for it. It's also the JRiver Media Server, which is, again, has a Logitech Media Server underneath it. JRiver sort of makes a nice product that again, I'm told quite a few audiophiles like it. It again has a subscription fee associated with it to get all of the finer details or finer applications contained within it. There's also Kodi. Some folks here are using Kodi as media servers at this point, but Kodi, as I use it, and I use Kodi every day, I use it for TV and videos. But it does have a media server side to it, as well. The Sonos server, if you've been in a Walmart at any point recently, you're familiar with Sonos. And some folks look like Sonos quite a bit. But I'm going to focus today a little bit on Logitech Media Server and some larger OSs that use Logitech Media Server. So let's just real quick, and actually I just got ahead of myself. I'm just going to go run through this very quickly. Logitech Media Server. Here's the interface application for the interface for Logitech Media Server, the interface for Roon, and the interface for JRiver. Quick about Roon, the piece that a lot of folks like about Roon is the information that comes along with it. When you're playing a song, it downloads information from the internet. We're going to have a little bit more on this in a couple minutes. And then JRiver, they're all sort of using the same metaphor in the interface, and it's a comfortable one, and it goes back to the Apple iTunes interface metaphor, how it worked, and it's nice. It works very well. But what I want to talk about is this operating system, a DAFile. It is a complete Linux-based audio operating system. I don't want to turn this talk into a sales pitch for DAFile, but it's a great place to start if you're looking to get into sort of nicer full operating system audio servers. DAFile is a great one. And if you take a look on my third bullet point, the killer app in DAFile, it has a CD ripper included in it. So if you have a giant cardboard box in your storage room somewhere, as I do, that has a couple thousand CDs in it, DAFile will run headless, and you can just walk in, drop a CD in, come back 10 minutes later, drop another CD in, and do that for however long it takes you to rip all your CDs. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. It is a web interface-based server system, so you access it through the local internet on your network in your house from another computer, a laptop, or a tablet. And it will connect, as all Logitech Media Server devices do, to client devices, which makes it really nice because you can build a very pleasing whole house audio system for very, very little work with Audiophile. And any of these Logitech Media Server devices will do that. Yes, sir.
When you say Linux-based, does it only run on a Linux computer, or can you run?
Well, this is a complete operating system, so it will live on a hard drive and it boots up. Like Audiophile boots. It's its own computer, correct. Audiophile, if you're keeping score on this, it's Gentoo Linux underneath the hood. The guy that wrote this, unfortunately, and sort of the frustration, or my frustration with Audiophile, is it's one guy that writes this, and so it's locked down. There isn't a large set of forums associated with it, but the nice part about it being one guy and the way that he has it set up is you really can't change anything on it. It's plug and play. It exists as a standalone. You start this up and it goes. Just to mention, since we're talking about Audiophile, I'm going to go through that, but I just want to also point out there are a couple of other very nice Linux-based audio servers. There's Vortex Box, which has been around for a long time, I think pushing 20 years at this point. It's Fedora-based, and again, on the back end of it is Logitech Media Server living underneath the operating system. And the Snake Oil server, which is my current server of choice, and it's Ubuntu. It's running on top of Ubuntu. The reason I'm not presenting Snake Oil server today, and I'm going to show some pictures at the end of the talk on Snake Oil server, is it's prohibitively complicated to install. It's got some scripting that you need to get into really the nuts and bolts on the Linux end of it to make it go. But from an audiophile side, it's got some nice features on it that you can really tweak on your computer to get some good sound, some real good sound out of it, and some other nice features connected to it. But both of these as well are Logitech Media Server based. I'm going to move forward and I'm just going to point this out. Just the network topology, if I'm confusing folks, how this works is Audiophile lives on an audio server, and it will connect from, that server itself can connect to a USB DAC and to a stereo, or directly out of the audio output on your computer to a stereo. But as well, on your home network, it'll immediately connect to Logitech Media Server clients, and we're going to talk about that in a second, that exist on your network. I have 5 clients across my house that I use, and I can switch between them with a phone app and play through my Logitech Media Server, my Audiophile devices. It's nice. These client devices, you can build them on a lot of things. I have a couple on standalone small fanless computers, but as well, there's a nice Raspberry Pi application called PiCore Player that's out there. I'll put that up on the screen at the end. That's a whole operating system that you can load onto a Raspberry Pi, and you can have your Raspberry Pi sitting on your network and exist as a client device, and it works great. But as well, also Logitech still connects with all the various Squeezebox variants. Does anybody out there have a Squeezebox? Any of the original Logitech Squeezeboxes? They can be. They're very nice one-speaker devices, and LMS has maintained backwards compatibility with these devices, and they work great. You can still get them for about $100 on eBay. People that have them like them a lot, but they're not meant to be plugged into a larger stereo. They exist standalone. Just to mention on the client devices, this is how I set up my Raspberry Pis. You can get some very nice digital audio converter hats that sit on top of plug into your Raspberry Pi, into the GPIO headers on the Raspberry Pi, and then running PiCore Player. You can access it. It has a web interface, so you can access all of the sound settings on your on the digital audio chip on the PiCore Player. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, which Gen Pis have you?
Honestly, PiCore Player is simple enough. It'll run on Gen 2 through all the way forward. As well, and I'll share with you. It's supposed to run on a 0. I've never tried on a 0 because I could never get a 0, and I bought one just upstairs today. So we're gonna try it on the 0. That's what I'm told. But PyCar Player is a great application, and again, it exists as a server as well. What I want to point out, and you may not be able to see it from where you're sitting. PyCar Player as well will install Logitech Media Server on itself. So you can install the entire Logitech Media Server application and plug a 500 gig hard drive into your Raspberry Pi and have that sit as a standalone media server. I've never done it. I'm not really comfortable with the idea of having something that big running on the same thing that's processing all my sound. But I haven't tried it, so I don't know. If you get onto the PyCar Player website, he's got a lot of documentation on it, and there are a lot of tweaks that you can do within the operating system to sort of mess with the sound quality of it. I'm just going to go and spend sort of the majority of the rest of the time that we have just running through a quick screen demo. I want to point out that I got a table set up upstairs with a small self-contained network set up to demo this. So if you want to come upstairs and check out what I have a Raspberry Pi running with PyCar Player and two laptops, one with the web interface and one running Audiophile standalone. So you can play with it and check it out if you like. And I'll be up there probably till about 12:30, 1 o'clock with that, so you guys can come up and check it out. Just as a demo, Audiophile, as it loads up on a screen, comes up with what looks like a rewritten Logitech Media Server interface, which is exactly what it is. But as well, the OS has a tab function, tabbed features on the side that let you through all the features of the operating system. You have CD Ripper, file manager, settings management, which has an enormous amount of settings, which I'm just going to show a little bit in a second. It's very easy to use and very intuitive. First install, it will run on a USB. It loads the entire operating system into RAM, so that when you're installing on the USB, you run it live and it comes up read-only, and then you can just install it back onto the USB that you've loaded off of. And it works great. It's in the system firmware tab on the settings menu. You load the entire distribution onto your USB, and it sets up a partition for media and a partition for the operating system to live. And the whole thing's 200 gig or 200 meg rather. I'm sorry, not gig, 200 meg. So it's nice. And on the USB, it's transportable, so you can take it to different computers, depending on how you want to use it or how you want to set up the server to be. And then what you end up with is a very familiar looking interface that we can go back to original Logitech Media Server, to iTunes. Your entire library lives in a nice graphical setting, and you navigate and play through your collection from here. And it looks pretty familiar I'm sure to mostly everybody. But on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you have a little dialogue. If you can see, it says PyCar Player on mine. I'm just going to go to the next screen, and from that, you can open that up, and you can check on any of the clients that you have living on your system in your house, and choose to play from there. This is my house, and you can see I have my test server and my regular server, my House Audio 1 server up, and these are all the clients that are connected to it. So I can go through and play off of each one of these as I'm doing. And it works really nice. Other side of this too, Christmas time, I can synchronize all these up if we're having a Christmas party and I have Christmas music coming from every part of my house. And it works nice. I like it quite a bit. It's a great feature. I'm sorry?
It's free.
The Audiophile is open. All of these are open source. All of these are free. The killer app to this, I think, for Audiophile, and the reason why I'm focusing it on today is he's the guy that wrote this. Put a nice CD Ripper application into it that goes out to. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Music Brain's Picard. It's an open source tagging application. So it's linked in with all of that. So it runs headless. All you have to do is drop a CD into the CD-ROM drive of the computer that's running on. it'll go out to the internet, grab all the tag information, all the CD cover information, and drop it into a folder, and whatever folder you designate as your music folder, and it'll save it there. So you could, if you have 1,000 CDs, you can just rip CDs fast. And back to my point before about the library, most libraries are still have CDs. You go take out a stack of CDs from your library and rip them all to your local collection. I didn't tell you to do that, though. That's has a gray area of legality on it. But this is a great feature on this. And again, this is all on the web interface. A full featured file manager, which you can take a look through your entire system. Any of the drives connected to the computer, any of the network drives, you can upload directly to here. I have a friend of mine that I built one of these systems on. When I go see him once a month or two, I bring a USB with digital files on it, and I just upload direct from the web interface to his server, and it works great. It's real nice. Then quickly, I'm just going to go through some of the settings available in a DAV file, just because this may help you out with some of the audio device settings on it. There's just a general network settings. The audio settings features kind of the great part of the settings menu, in the sense that the writer of this keeps this kernel, or the Linux kernel, on here custom, and he's constantly updating it with drivers for very expensive USB DAC. So if you're somebody that has a really good USB DAC, the drivers are in here, and it works plug and play, and you can tweak all the settings to your heart's content on it, and make it work. Yes, sir. Right. I don't think the chip. I think you're limited to whatever the chip's been.
That's right. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about it, sure, I'm happy to talk about DACs. Let's talk at the end. So this is a nice feature. The other thing within DAV file, if you're a DSD guy, I don't know how many of you are listening to. Is anyone here listening to DSD files? Anyone know what DSD files are? Okay, well, we'll get the audio producer. Thank God there's DSD file. Yeah, but it's a much larger conversion, a much larger file, and this is that smoke and mirrors thing. Some folks feel that it's a better sound. It's give or take. I've experimented with them. It's hard to find them. Yeah, this goes back to Super. DSD is the data format on Super Audio CDs. Yep.
That is very for purists.
And see, I've heard people say exactly the opposite. For the purists, they want that stuff in there because it's.
Except it's coming from the converter, not the music.
Oh no! Now we're talking about something different. Yeah. I'd like to talk to you more about this. Let's talk at the end. But it's great. But as well, the other thing they got in here is they have an HD CD decoder in this as well. I have never seen an HD CD file. I've never played with it. I don't know anything about it. So if you guys know about it, if anyone online listening knows about this, I'd love to hear about it, because it's a whole other thing.
That's 196%, right?
HD CDs.
Yeah,
Yeah, but find a raw file. Can you tell me where I can get a raw file of an HD CD?
Great question.
I've never seen one.
My servers, yeah. They're too big.
Just moving off the sound settings, there's a power settings thing. If you can get in, if you're really into tweaking the power on your computer to sort of address sound issues that come from the power on the computer, there's some nice features in that tab. I'm skipping over that. That's a lot to get into. Just moving on to the storage. And this is nice, is that what exists on here is you can direct the mass storage device that I have DAV file living on this computer is a 500 gig USB drive, but I can direct the operating system to the native drive. And so if I have Windows or something installed on the native computer, I can direct it to the music program on that, or the music folder rather, on that computer, and it works very easy. But the other side to that as well, I can point to a network drive and immediately grab anything that's living on my network and import that into my database. NFS, Samba or CIFS, SSHFS, and FTPFS works just fine. And I've used all of these. NFS seems to work, in my opinion, seems to work the best. It just seems to be the fastest locally on a local drive. But this is nice. So you can have music folders all over your house that you can point the server to. Again, and then there's a backup feature. You can schedule backups if you want to plug a 500 gig hard drive into your server and have backups running as you're doing your CD ripping. It's all here for you. He's kind of put that in here. As well, on the bottom here, I want to mention this setting or this button for advanced media server settings. When you click on this in DAV file, what it actually brings you to is the general settings menus of Logitech Media Server. I'm going to bring that up. If you've used Logitech Media Server, anyone here using Logitech Media Server? No, one person. So you're probably familiar with this menu that's up here. This is DAV file's rewrite of the interface, but it's essentially Logitech Media Server's settings menus. And in this, if you're not, I don't see a lot of people familiar with Logitech Media Server. There are hundreds of plugins for Logitech Media Server. If you want to connect to your Spotify account and play through Logitech Media Server, it's in here. I use it to connect to my Bandcamp account. There are a lot of audio settings in here. There are a lot of information download settings, and that's what I want to talk about. And there's skin settings where you can change the skin on your Logitech Media Server as well if you want to change or customize the interface to however you like. There are hundreds of plugins in here, but I want to talk specifically about information and skins. And if you go through, you can see there's a couple of plugins here: song info, song lyrics. There's a couple other information plugins located all over this plugins menu. And then there's something called the material skin, which has sort of become the default. Even though Logitech Media Server doesn't come with the material skin, there is something called the material skin that was developed by some of the writers for Logitech Media Server that works really well, and I want to show that to you. But quickly, within DAV file, I want to mention that when you go to this interface tab, he doesn't include in here the ability to change the skin. Sort of the skin dialog or selection in this tab is gone. Just want to quick flip over to Logitech Media Server. If you're using DAV file, Logitech Media Server's official or default interface is still there. It lives on port 9000, so you just change the address, add a port 9000 to it. It opens the default Logitech Media Server settings, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. And from in that, on the bottom right-hand corner of LMS, you can bring up Logitech Media Server's settings menu. And it looks similar. If you go to that interface menu that we just looked at on DAV file, you can see the web interface pull down is there. You pull it down. Once you've installed a material skin, you pull it down, you select material skin, and what you end up with is very nice, I think very pleasing, dark interface. And you can, the settings for the material skin are in here. You can spend all day changing this to however you like. But what's nice about this is if you've enabled the interface settings, or sorry, the information plugins on Logitech Media Server, you can just, as you're playing, click on this little information button, and going back to Rune and back to JRiver and back to a lot of the other media servers, what a lot of people like about those is this information. And I want to keep talking about this connecting to our music thing. This isn't a record sleeve that you get to hold and touch and open up and play with, but you get a lot of information on the music that you're listening to. The way that this is set up, you're going to get an artist biography, you'll get information on the album, and it pulls all this information from Wikipedia, so you get a lot of information, and then it grabs all of the lyrics from the internet as well. So you get all that stuff on the song that you're listening to, and then if you scroll down to the bottom of these columns, what else that you get is a very nice set of all of the albums by that artist that you may have in your collection. You can go right from here and play, and a collection of similar artists that it gets off the internet for you. If any of these exist in your collection, just by clicking on them, you bring up all that artist's albums, and you can play them direct from there. And it's real nice. And there's also, it's kind of cut off a little bit on the bottom. You can also navigate through the album that you're listening to from here. And Logic Media Server also includes quite a bit of random play settings that you can get into, some fun random play stuff. But that's Logic Media Server is a whole nother conversation to get into that. But it's some great pieces. There are alternatives out there. I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, Snake Oil Server. I like Snake Oil Server because of the sound tweaks that the guy that wrote this has done to the Linux kernel. And he's done some neat things. He calls it Snake Oil Server because it's questionable whether all of the tweaks are actually doing anything. And he has quite a bit written on the website about this. My issue with Snake Oil, for folks that are just getting into this, is a little bit, if you have no Linux background, it gets a little complicated, the setup of it. But once it's set up, it works great. It doesn't have a CD ripper built into it. I'm not sure why he hasn't done that yet. The guy that writes this is somewhere in Western Australia, and he's constantly asking for his users for money. So for donations. So I think he doesn't have the time to get into the CD ripper side to this. But it's got some real nice features that I like on it. But it comes default with the material skin on Logic Media Server. But again, like all these servers, it's LMS sitting on the background. And from that, it has the same information set up that you can enable through DAVfile. I like Snake Oil quite a bit. I'm up in the air at the moment. I'm using this, but DAVfile is a little bit more regularly developed, and I like it just as much as well with the CD. It's 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other, is as they say. Moving forward to just talk about, since we're talking about personal digital audio servers on the move, what are people listening to? How are people listening to digital music? Are folks in here listening to Spotify? You guys are here, obviously, maybe not because you're not into this. Anybody listening to Spotify? One Spotify user, a couple. The guys under 30 in the room, or the guys under. Listen, I'm sorry to say that, but you guys are using Spotify. Everybody likes Spotify. Are you guys familiar with Tidal and Deezer and Qobuz and that stuff? Some other streaming services. These are great. They're commercial. Tidal, Deezer, and Qobuz have some. I've heard some arguments, and I don't know about this, that the lossless that's coming out of these are a little bit better than Spotify. I'm not familiar, but these all have are subscription-based services, and Apple has its lossless. I don't know if Amazon has upgraded to a lossless yet. Does anybody know? I don't know if Amazon's doing lossless streaming. Is it? But they're not doing it yet. But there is DIY alternatives. Has anyone in the room heard of Subsonic? Are you familiar with Subsonic? Fantastic. Subsonic is great. Unfortunately, it's no longer being written. The guy that wrote Subsonic has converted it into something called MadSonic, which now charges you $5 a month. But Subsonic is still out there and available for download. It lives in all the major Linux repositories, and it plugs in a very, very nice web accessible interface. The difference here is Subsonic does not work in the same way. It works good for on the go. It streams out across the internet, so it wants to do a conversion and drop down your lossless audio to MP3. And you do some settings here on it to set it up. But this is what I use for my phone streaming if I'm on the go. This is what I use in my car, and I have access to my whole collection through Subsonic. Subsonic exists as an open source project now as well, called AirSonic. There's also something called Funkwhale, which I've never used, and Ampache, which is very old and has been around for a while. Some folks like it. I've never been able to configure it correctly, but it's a nice piece. And this is for on the go if you want to have your music available to you externally outside of your network. Yes, sir.
So I have a question. So you can access everything on the go with collection.
Mhm.
Does that mean that your cell phone is going back to the home
Yep.
server? Okay. What are the security?
I have a port opened on my home network that allows me in. It is, if can't bring it up on here. There is security on the application in terms of if you're in a setting where you're concerned about outside security, I would warn you that it's probably not the most secure thing going, and I would advise you to check that out. I'm not worried about it, because I'm me, and I just, it has a nice login that I plug in my username and password, and I can bring up this interface rather to get to my music, and it's a great web app. I should also mention for Logitech Media Server, there's lots of really nice phone-based remote controls. If you're on your network at home, you can control your stereo from your phone or iPad. Again, I highly recommend you guys check this out if you're interested in something on the go. Well, what you've lost or what's disappeared from Subsonic, if you're one of the early users of it before he stopped developing this branch of it, you were able to get a personalized URL to log onto it. And when he discontinued it, he grandfathered everybody into it that paid the $25 for the URL. So I just have to go to myurl.subsonic.org and I get into my music collection. And that's what he's charging you for the subscription fee on Mad Sonic now. But Mad Sonic is a nice application as well. And here's the thing, I've never seen it, and everybody in this room is telling me this too. I've never seen anybody that knows about this stuff. But this is a way to access your own personal media collection. And I take this back to the record thing. I prefer this than spending the $20 a month or $12 a month on Spotify, simply for the fact that this is my collection. It's curated by me. I know what's there. I like that.
So that's not public to anyone else.
No. It's just me. I like that. The Spotify people will argue with me that, well, Spotify will do that too. You have your collection on Spotify, and I agree with you. I like the fact that I spent however many hours converting all my CDs to FLAC audio, and then I can access all that stuff wherever I am, and I don't have to get into any of this.
Yeah, I heard recently asked the bank to try to build this record collection that had subscription services and theirs was denied. So that person.
Yeah, I could imagine you could do that, right?
That's what I want to check out. I mean, I understand that he lost everything there because he couldn't build
On Spotify that he had. Yeah, I'm it's hysterical that you can do.
Because it reinforces you that he can build this.
Right. I'm sorry I didn't put together a sheet with all the websites for these things, but they're easily found on using Google. And I do have a sheet up here with my email address on it. Just contact me. I can send you all this information. And some of these get funky. Setting up Subsonic's got some fun things that you have to kind of deal with when you're setting it up, but it works pretty good. There's some router settings that you have to get into with it, but that's not too big a deal. Here's my email address. If you like it, if you don't want to take one of the handouts that I have that has the email address on it, please, by all means, email me, and I can help you with some of this stuff. But I highly recommend Snake Oil Server and Audiophile both. Equivalently, if you have some Linux knowledge, check out Snake Oil Server. If you're new to Linux and you're specifically wanting this for ripping CDs, check out Audiophile, because I think that he's got that going. There's also Vortex Box as well is still out there. Anyone familiar with Vortex Box in here? Oh, nobody familiar with Vortex Box. Vortex Box is written by a guy named Andrew Gillis. He owns a company called Small Green Computers. Maybe you might have come across audiophiles in the room, may have come across that. He makes very expensive power things, but he also has this operating system that he keeps going. He's now changed to something called Sonic Orbiter. You can find Sonic Orbiter out there for Vortex Box as well. And I'm giving you all these just because I don't want to be a sales pitch for Daphile, but I think it's a great operating system to check any of this out. Does anybody have any questions, sir?
Yeah, could you clarify one thing, when you say that file is web-based or web interface-based, can you use it when you're not connected to the computer?
You can use it when you're not connected to the internet. It works just fine. In fact, the demo that I have running upstairs isn't connected to the internet. It won't, if you're ripping CDs, for example, obviously it won't go out to the internet to get the information to rip the CD, but you can still use it. It works just fine.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I will be upstairs for about an hour or two now. And if you want to come up and play around with it upstairs, I have it running and ready to go. Some music on it.
Commercial.
Sure.
Title. There you go. That's what
There's a guy online. Darko Audio is a guy that does anyone familiar with? It's a YouTube show for